I've had some growing concerns about Eastern Orthodoxy for some time. And considering there hasn't been that much material out there refuting Eastern Orthodoxy itself, I know that there's plenty of material on Roman Catholicism. We know that there's plenty of material refuting that. But there really isn't that enough material out there to refute Eastern Orthodoxy in general. We can point out all the things in Roman Catholicism which are dangerous, and there are many books pointing this out. But it appears that Eastern Orthodoxy is often overlooked, mainly because of certain things. Now, it is my fond hope in this video to address the issues in Eastern Orthodoxy in the hopes that the Eastern Orthodox recognize their errors and turn to Christ away from their false religion. I shall spend the next few videos addressing some of the issues of the Eastern Orthodox Church that I have come across. The first talk I'm going to be dealing with is the subject of icons, or the veneration of icons. And I had recently watched a lecture that was conducted on the subject of icons at an Orthodox school. One claim you'll hear from the Eastern Orthodox adherents is that they do not worship the icons themselves, but rather venerate them. They also make it clear that they don't worship it, but respect it. However, the problem I see is that they wouldn't cut any ice with God in the Old Testament or the New Testament itself. We know the cherubim were placed on the ark. They were images of 3D, but they were not to be worshipped as idols or bowed down to in religious reverence. The same can be said about icons themselves. Now, although one can claim that he or she is respecting the person the image represents rather than the image, how can one justify scripturally using the icon in this way? The cherubim and the snake that Moses used were used for a purpose but were not venerated at all. Surely the same principle would apply to an icon itself. It is also worth mentioning that Hezekiah did eventually destroy the serpent because of it being bowed down to and having incense sacrificed to it. Now, wouldn't bowing to an icon be a form of idolatry itself? Even if it's veneration and not worship in your sight, what would it be in God's sight? In Exodus, in the Decalogue, the second commandment says, in Exodus 20, quote, "You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything, in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them, nor worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments." Unquote. This doesn't forbid painting icons or building a statue for decoration. It does, however, repudiate the idea of using an icon and the statue for the purpose of worship or even for devout veneration. Again, I'm aware the Eastern Orthodox claim is not to worship icons, but venerate them instead, but it is still a concern that I have. In the lecture, Corey John Keeble, the man who presented the lecture, mentions in passing John of Damascus, or John of Damascene, on the subject of icons themselves. Now, while I agree with John Damascene's interpretation of Philippians 2 that it teaches the deity of Christ, which is another topic, the main problems I have with John of Damascene's sermon on icons is his endorsement of venerating images. One point he makes in his first sermon is, "You who refuse to worship images would not worship the Son of God, the living image of the invisible God in his unchanging form. Though we do worship Christ as Yahweh God, we do not worship his flesh." John of Damascus's point about refusing to venerate images entails refusing to worship the Son of God does not logically follow. Christ commanded that all are to honor the Son just as we are to honor the Father. Jesus would never endorse the veneration of a drawing at all. Furthermore, the point that John makes about the cherubim doesn't justify the veneration of icons for a simple reason. The Jews did not construct icons for that purpose, or the icons for that purpose. Furthermore, to anathematize those who forbid the veneration of icons as those who are trying to put people back under the law is unthinkable. The Apostle Paul made it clear that idolaters will not inherit the kingdom of heaven. Another point to bring to the table is that the Jews bowed to the Shekinah glory that is found in the temple and the tabernacle, not to the artifacts themselves. Although John later says in the second part of his treatise that image making was forbidden on account of idolatry, he goes on to say the following, quote, "I never said thou shalt not make the image of the cherubim in adoration before propitiatory. What I said was, thou shalt not make to thyself gods of metal, and thou shalt not make to thyself gods of metal, and thou shalt adore the creature instead of the Creator, nor any creature whatsoever as God, nor have I served the creature rather than the Creator," unquote. Now, once again, however, assuming I've read the quotation correctly, I've already made the point about the cherubim themselves, so I needn't go into too much detail regarding the matter itself. Although the repudiation of Manichaean Gnosticism is commendable, John of Damascus should not anathematize those who refuse to venerate icons. I deem this a case of correcting error with error rather than correcting error with truth. Yes, matter is treated as good in the Bible, but not in the sense of icon veneration. Even though the cross is a biblical symbol, we're not to venerate the cross, but the one who died on it. Also, the serpent in the wilderness allowed people to be saved from the disaster, and that incident was used by Jesus as typology, pointing to his lifting up and people looking to him for their salvation. The serpent wasn't used as a means of veneration initially, nor was it built for that purpose. And as I mentioned before, Hezekiah destroyed it because of its usage in idolatry. Though the saints in the New Testament are held in high esteem, I would not say that this allows us to venerate them. Considering that is not the point of the writer of the Hebrews himself, the anonymous writer uses examples of faith in the Old Testament saints rather than for personal devotion. And though we are not under the law, that doesn't allow us to venerate saints or icons in this insane manner, nor are we obligated to. Though there aren't any explicit commands regarding this issue, it should be obvious from the context of the Decalogue that icons are covered in this regard. You can read the subject of John's letters online itself. I'll address the subject of veneration of saints in another video. But anyway, I'm persuaded in my mind about one reason why we're not given a description of Jesus while he exists on earth. It is to safeguard the brethren and the saints from bowing down to an image and icon of Christ, rather than bowing to Christ himself. I shall be speaking in the next part on baptism.